This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you like underground music, movies, and more, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed merch, vinyl, CDs, and more. Plug in the discount code 666 at portlanddistro.com for 15% off on all purchases.
Hello, everyone. Another week has gone by, and we're back with Everything Went Black. This week, it's Ralph and I again. And this episode is actually unique in that it comes directly from the Patreon group. And I'd like to thank Alex for suggesting this. So what Ralph and I are going to do this week is talk about the most influential guitarists on what we do creatively. And, neither one of us are shredders, but, this is like, I guess, the icons to us that we've modeled ourselves after and how that's influenced us as players. And, neither one of us are ripping solos like Eddie Van Halen or, Yngwie Malmsteen. So you won't find any of those people on the list per se. And so Ralph, how are you doing?
I'm doing actually okay, except for the madness at school amidst the pandemic, which is still a drag. It's a really sunny but cold Saturday afternoon. I just had a great walk with my buddy dog Titus and listened to a lot of music. I just got the new Adam Neville book you suggested, and I read the first 50 pages, and yeah, that's great, man. So I'm actually feeling okay. Yeah, it's like I'm relaxed, looking forward to this episode. It's a great idea. So yeah, it's cool that people like reach out through the Patreon and suggest things they would like us to do.
That's awesome. I'm glad you enjoy the book. You're enjoying the book, man. Neville is like one of the top weird fiction writers out there right now, contemporary guy. Before we get going, I want to thank our new patrons on the Patreon system. We got William, Brent, Marcos, and Ralph. So thanks for joining. If you guys aren't familiar with what Patreon is, it's essentially it's a way of supporting the podcast. You could join at a couple of different levels. You can do like a $1 membership, which gives you access to the bonus episodes. Or you can do the level 2 $5 membership, which gives you access to everything. As soon as it's done, all the regular episodes go on Patreon, so you don't have to wait a week to listen to everything, plus the bonus episodes. And one of the things that Ralph and I discussed is that if you're on Patreon, you can actually make some recommendations as to subjects or things that you want to hear on this show. So not to say that we're not going to, we're going to ignore you guys out there who aren't Patreon members, but if you're on Patreon, you get a little bit more juice just because you're part of the elite team. Would you say that? Would you agree with that, Ralph?
Yeah. We could call it the Cthulhu Youth Crew or something, we have like our own turbo unit. It's the Patreon system is just so cool. And I follow a couple of like sources that have a Patreon. And when I decided to so let's join, and I joined like several things. I'm like, also, why not join the Everything Went Black? Because I took the cheap ass $1 solution because I'm a cheap ass guy. But first of all, yes, I'm involved in this thing. But second, I'm before everything, I'm a fan of what you do with the podcast. And there's a lot of stuff you do, and you've been doing it for years. So it's cool for me to support this. And also, like, the money goes like to good sources in the end. So it's not like that you will paint your town hall of an apartment with golden curtains or something. It's the money goes to good sources. It's fun for us. It supports your work, the web space that you pay and stuff. So like $1 a month. That's like $12 a year. That's like not eating one pizza at one Friday where you're bored. So that should be worth it for all of this fucking content that's on there. And that's already so much cool stuff to check out.
It's substantially less than 1 cup of coffee, I might add.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, I mean, we're still figuring out other ways to utilize this thing. I know that there's a way to schedule a live like hangout with members and things like that, where we can do a hangout and talk and discuss things live. And I'm exploring that, and just seeing what other possibilities there are. Now, one of the other things you mentioned is that the money's not just going into my pocket so I can blow it on cocaine and hookers. I use my own money for that. So, but the excuse me. I have to cut that out. The money is actually every quarter we're going to donate a portion, or we're going to donate the entire month's funds to a charity. And in April we're going to do a literacy charity. So that's we're keep in mind that we're not just trying to take, we're trying to give, and that's one of the positive things behind this whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is not like a cash machine, but it's fun. I mean, you of all people, you've been doing it for years, and you have Necromaniacs, and you have Everything Went Black. So you're a guest on several other podcasts. It takes a lot of time, what you do next to your actual job, and I think to support this in this cause, and then not even like, as you said, like not working into your wallet, but like actually doing something good with this. So Mike and I talked about it's like sources that should get the money, and we will change that up. So we have different kind of cool foundations and shit where we think like people deserve that, and that's where your money is going to end up and do something good. And you support us because we can do what we like here. It's fun for us. And it's cool that we get to interact with all of you out there. We have I operate the Instagram, and there's people reaching out, and it's always like, oh, Mike, here's a mail for you, and we get back to people. And on the Patreon, there's a whole system of like commenting things and discussing things. And I think that's where also you can write mails, and that's where this idea came from for today's episode. And motivated by what we're going to do today, we had another great idea. Should I tell them about this now, Mike? Or
yeah, go ahead, man. Go for it. We're on the subject, so just go for it.
Yeah. So we love the interaction with you out there. There's so much cool feedback and suggestions of like music or movies we should check out. And so now this today is like a fan suggestion. Like I want you to discuss this topic, which Mike will introduce to you in a minute. But we thought about how about we're doing something like a Q&A, because there were questions about like, oh yeah, you mentioned this band once, or you did this. How about this? You guys can contact us through the Patreon, and ask us questions, like things that you would like Mike and I to discuss, or tell about our opinion on it, or shit like this. So we'll gather these questions, and then at some point we'll pick out, I don't know, we'll just pick out some and record an episode where we discuss your questions to us about, well, whatever you want to ask us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that I have to apologize that my voice is a little froggy as a result of intense band rehearsals. Over the next few weeks, you guys will understand why we're rehearsing so much. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Not that we don't rehearse a lot, but there's an extra bonus motivation now to put in some extra time rehearsing and getting ready for the live performances. So I can't say anything right now, but in the next few weeks, we'll be announcing some cool stuff.
So what are we going to talk about today, Mike?
Well, before we do that, I in the spirit of community, I want to just also thank Jackie Smith at Into the Necrosphere for really helping us out by mentioning us on his fine podcast, Into the Necrosphere, which, if you're a fan of black metal and extreme music, you definitely need to check that out. And he's literally the only music podcast I listen to. And every Tuesday I tune in, and he delivers an incredible show. So by all means, if you don't listen to him already, check him out. And also Brandon Legion of the Horror Wolf podcast is also part of the team, part of the community. And the really cool thing about all this is, used to be years ago, I would like say things like, music is how I have people in my life. Like, everyone that's been important to me in my life, I've met through music. It's been my sole connection to the world, really. Now I can say that a lot of my friends I've met through podcasting, and I count Jackie and I count Brandon as friends, and we developed a friendship through podcasting, communicating via whatever technology we have out there. I've been guests on their shows, they've been guests on mine, and it's just like really cool, and I feel very fortunate to be part of this thing, and that's why I'm mentioning these guys. And not only do they do great work on the podcasting front, but they're friends, they're actual friends, and I just want to shout those guys out.
Yeah, I would add our buddy Carl Hikara.
Yeah.
Carl is not doing a podcast, but he's very active on Facebook, and he's doing this great online radio show called The Upstairs Room. It's like he does like some of the best playlists that I've heard in a while. So that's always cool. Like when a new episode comes out, and after great papers, or just like driving home in my car from work, and it's just like put on this playlist, and it's just like all killer, no filler. Yeah. So Carl, totally. Shout out to you.
Yeah. Carl's also a encyclopedia of knowledge regarding weird fiction and other literature. So we talk about that a lot, and I'm sure you and Ralph and you probably talk to him about that stuff all the time too.
Right, yeah. Suggested great bands. He got some bands from me, and is always like, "Oh, do you know this? Do you know that?" He's a musician himself, does some cool stuff, and yeah, man. Just hopefully at some point I can meet all these people in real life. That would be awesome.
So once again, for today's episode, this comes from Patreon. Thanks, Alex, our buddy Alex. And the request was to talk about influential guitar players. And so Ralph and I decided that, I mentioned before that we're not shredders. Like, we're not one of these Yngwie, Van Halen type, people. I guess you and I are more, I would say, songwriters or stylists or something like that. So we're going to start from the beginning and talk about some of the guitarists that have molded us as creative people, and why. And first off, why guitar? Like, what got us even interested in playing guitar? So that's basically that's the premise of the show this week.
Yeah. We hope that's what Alex wants. Alex, if that's not what you wanted, ask us again, and we'll do another one with the specifics.
I think we hit on what he wanted. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, all right, cool.
So why did you start playing guitar, man?
To get laid, bro.
Of course. Well, besides chicks, like, why?
Yeah. I actually wanted to be a drummer first. That, like, little did I know about how uncool most drummers are. No, I don't. No offense to drummers. It's like I could never do what you do. Like, I tried. I even played drums on one record, but I fucking sucked. No, man, it's just like I wanted to play a rock instrument real bad, and my father said, "You're not musical. Like, you you can't." It's like, dude, you never let me even try an instrument. It's like, no, you can't do it. It's like, great, cool. So he suggested I learn the tuba, and I'm like, okay, dude, I'm an overweight guy in his puberty, and you want me to play the fucking tuba? I will never meet any person that wants to be my friend. So then, like, I couldn't afford a drum, and there was no room anywhere. So I went for the next best thing, and that was the bass guitar because I I saw guitar players, but at that time when I said like I want to learn an instrument, I was so hooked of Justice for All by Metallica, which doesn't even have a bass sound, but I saw the live videos, and Jason Newsted was one of the coolest guys I've seen on these metal videos. So that was the guy like, oh man, I want to be a bass player. And then I wanted to get a bass, and of course my father said like, no, you won't get money for this. But I snuck into like a compound where rehearsal spaces are underneath like an industrial building in the little town I come from. And I started to hang out with these punk kids, and in this like complex, there was a Nazi band,
Oh, Jesus.
and yeah, it's like one of these, like German redneck Nazi bands. And at some point, oh man, I was 14, I think, yeah. Um, the decision was made that we break into their room and just flood the room, and so we did this, and I hope like when I'm 42 now, so I hope the police can't find me anymore for this. But we decided to go in there, like we broke open the door and just like flooded the room with buckets full of water, and there was like a cheap ass bass guitar sitting like next to the door. It didn't have any strings. It looked broken. So when we fled, I just took it and ran away.
Did it
I
have
hid
like
it
a
in.
swastika on it or anything like that?
Yeah, no, it was just like a super sketchy, shitty bass. Like, don't no, I don't think there were any band stickers on there. Um, but I took this home, took my allowance, got some bass strings, had someone tell me how to adjust them, and I hid it in my closet and like just like practiced bass playing. And at some point, I got allowed to like take a course of bass guitar, and but there were no bands in like that I wanted to join. I played in a German punk band for a while where we did like German punk covers and uh did like shitty cover versions of like pop songs. It was terrible. Um and then I changed schools, and there were these like by that time I was already into hardcore and punk, like real hardcore. And there was one guy, he was like two classes above me, and he wore an integrity shirt. And I entered, and I had I think it was a neglect shirt, or yeah, I think it was a neglect shirt. And he's like, "Oh wow, you know neglect?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, you know integrity." And he's like, "Yeah, cool." So we started hanging out, and he had a band called Absent, a vegan straight edge hardcore band, but it sounded more like integrity, because these guys were all over the Holy Terror stuff. And then they said, like, yeah, we don't need a bass player. We have one, but we need a second guitar player. I'm like, yeah, I just know the bass. And it's just like, yeah, man, if you use the second finger and you learn a power chord, you can play the guitar pretty much for what we wanted to do. So they got me like I took my bike, rode out to one of the rehearsals. The other guitar player had a second guitar, showed it to me, and I started practicing like an idiot. And like then I joined the band, and yeah, everything from there well, started evolving. But that's the way I had to get into guitar playing. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. For me, I was always very active in music as a kid. I mean, my mom specifically was happy that I had interest in music because she was always afraid of me getting hurt doing sports, because the only sports I was interested in were wrestling and football, and she was always against that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, my dad intervened and, was like, yeah, the boy has to become a man somehow, in his narrow worldview of what men really should be. So, so my mom was happy that I was playing clarinet and trumpet and violin, and there was this very, very good program at my school. So I was interested in music. And then, I was listening to the early heavy metal stuff that I liked, Judas Priest, the aforementioned Van Halen, and I'm like, man, this is like incredible, I thought about playing guitar, and I was like, oh man, there's no way I would, be able to play stuff like this. So back in the day, on the USA Network, there was a show called Night Flight, which now you can actually get the Night Flight app on your and watch all the old material they had. And there was always these live performances of various bands that you would tune into on television. It was on cable TV. And I saw the Go-Go's performing a live set. And the live mix, the bass was like a very prominent sound. It was high in the mix, I guess. So I'm like, man, the bass, and the Go-Go's have pretty happening bass lines on their songs.
Yep.
So I'm like, I think I could do this, man. Like it's like you one note, you can play one. You don't have to play these crazy chords or anything. So I'm like, all right, I want to play bass. All right. Bass, that's what it is. I want to be like the Go-Go's playing bass, these cool bass lines. Then I took guitar lessons in school. All right. And we had a teacher. His name was Mr. Binder. There was two teachers. I was in middle school at this point. Mr. Binder and Mr. Smith. Okay. Mr. Binder, he kind of, he looked like, like kind of like this Chris Christopherson sort of dude with like long hair. And he wore like a vest and everything. And, he'd been in bands and performed and gone on tour. And now he's a music teacher, And Mr. Smith was this gay black guy who was involved in theater. And one of his big claims to fame, one of his big credentials, was that he was in one of the New York productions of Cats. He's a singer, piano player. So these two guys were like very influential on my musical development. We got the cool, stony Mr. Binder, and the gay African American Mr. Smith, and they were both very intense role models for me as I was growing up. The vocal, the way that he sang, and his freedom of using his voice and all that sort of stuff was like really, really heavy with me, man. I was like, man, maybe I should be a singer too. Look how cool this guy is, So I started taking guitar lessons, and we were learning Proud Mary, and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, there's nothing to this guitar playing, So yeah, I can play these chords. And then I discovered bar chords, and I was like, oh man, this is how they do it, the bar chord, It's almost like playing bass with one finger. So, And like around that time, I was getting into the early Sabbath, so Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath, there's a lot of like slow, heavy riffs on that. And I'm like, all right, I don't have to play fast like a Judas Priest song. I can play slow. So Sabbath and punk were like they came to me kind of like first Sabbath, and then a couple of years later, punk. And then I'm realizing like, oh man, I only need like 2 or 3 chords, and I got it made. So that was my introduction and why I picked guitar.
Oh, all the right reasons.
Yeah.
So would say that that Tony Iommi was your like first guitar hero?
I would say Tony Iommi was my first guitar hero. And also, to some extent, was the enabler of the guy who thought, maybe it would make me think that I can actually do this thing on some level, because like, you listen to like KK Downing and Glenn Tipton and Judas Priest, and you're like, I mean, I'm not at that level yet, you know what I mean? I can't, I'm not going to be able to do that stuff just yet, So that was the Iommi influence is what opened the door for me. But what really, really opened the door wider was when I discovered the Ramones. Okay? Now, Johnny Ramone, a.k.a. John Cummings, made it even more like accessible to me to be able to play guitar. I mean, they stripped it all down. It was like fast, but there was only 3 chords. So if you can play fast and play 3 chords, that was like the hidden ingredient there. Not get too advanced, and yeah, so like the young version of Mike Hill, I'm like, oh yeah, I got 3 chords, I could play the E, I could play G, A, and that's it. Ramones songs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the punk the success of punk and the influence of punk on young musicians is the appeal that you actually can pull this off. Because one of my heroes was I mentioned before that I like grew like into Metallica, like they were like a super influential band, and I wanted to be like Jason Newsted. But when I watched then I ended up playing the guitar, and I kept on watching the Live Shit Binge and Purge videotape and all these live videos that I recorded off of Headbangers Ball, and Metallica got bigger. Like the Black Album was, I liked the Black Album, but I wasn't like never super heavy into it. But by that time already like got the older stuff, because Justice for All was my first Metallica. And I obsessed about like watching live videos of them, and just like whenever I saw Kirk Hammett, I was like, I don't like that guy. He's like, to this day, he's not a guy that I like. I don't think like I don't know, like he's just
You don't
not
like
my
him?
cup of tea. Yeah,
Okay.
even though I hate the Explorer guitar, James Hetfield like was like, okay, I think I can do that. And to this day, I think like there's a tie between him and Max Cavalera for being the best rhythm guitar player of all times in my book. Yeah.
Oh, dude, James Hetfield is the premier rhythm guitar player in metal, man. That there's no one tighter than that guy when it comes to playing, man, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the punk rock though, like the other thing about the Ramones, and for me personally, was like my parents were really, when I was growing up, I heard a lot of music from my parents, and it was all like early like 50s, girl groups, and rockabilly, old rock and roll stuff, you know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
early on for me was very influential. Like I loved like the Shirelles and the Flamingos and stuff like that. And there's like shadows of that in the Ramones. I mean, Johnny
Yeah.
and Joey Ramone, like there's a lot of that Chuck Berry in there, and there's a lot of girl group kind of vocal things going on and subject matters. So as when I started formulating the idea of playing in a band, actually, I was like, all right, well, I'm a punk. I gave up on metal because none of the punks were into metal. So it's like I can't say that I like rock music because now I'm a punk, and I'm hanging out with punks and we're like trying to make music. So I really gravitated towards after Johnny Ramone, Billy Zoom from X was another huge influence. And some of the early bands I played in, we were in that style. That kind of like rockabilly, punk rockabilly like thing, and also Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls. Like, so the triumvirate of like early influences for me were Johnny Thunders, Johnny Ramone, Billy Zoom, and I later found out that Johnny Thunders, his real name is John Anthony Gonzalez. So I was like, all right, he's an Italian, another Italian American here. So.
Yeah, like here, I mean, that's the to me was like I was into metal, and from metal I found my way really fast into death metal, and I will come to this in a minute. But at the same time, like we talked about it in a bunch of episodes, like because I'm a 90s kid, so like everything that happened between 90 and 94, I completely like observed and like inhaled. So I couldn't like I like my first things were like, okay, so we want to sound like Integrity with that band. Like Absent became Repugnant. That was like the name of the band, and we like fully embraced like the Holy Terror sound. And the guy like we everybody like worshipped was like A Double, like Aaron Melnick, the original guitar player that founded Integrity with Dwid and his brother. And I mean, he was ripping like Slayer solos, and I couldn't do that. But like the general thing that he played, I thought like I can do that. So like A Double was like one of my icons. I saw Hetfield, and I was obsessed with Sepultura with Arise and Chaos AD, and I thought Max Cavalera was one of the best frontman and rhythm guitar players. Always wanted to have a BC Rich Warlock guitar, which I ended up having, but being like 6'6" tall, this looks like a ukulele, so it looked stupid. Um, so these two guys were important, but I couldn't pull off what they did. But then grunge happened. And of course, I was like one of these kids that like got sucked into it with Nevermind. And of course, there was like, okay, there's Kurt Cobain, and he's playing this cool Jaguar guitar. And I loved Nirvana, but he wasn't that big of an influence. But in grunge thing, the guitar player that really made me want to play better was Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains.
Oh, right on, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So when Dirt came out, I like the first like Them Bones, like this intro is just like so heavy. I would say it's probably one of the like heaviest riffs next to We Gotta Know of Cro-Mags. Like like there's these riffs that have like they're so heavy, and like I think this that's so incredibly heavy. But he could like play solos that were I could understand the solos. I could never understand a Slayer solo, but like I think even Hanneman and King didn't understand what they're doing. But Jerry Cantrell looked like a guy that like if I practiced hard enough, I could probably do it. I never did it. I should have practiced more. But he was one of my guitar icons back then.
Yeah, totally. I get that. Like the pentatonic sort of soloing that he did seemed a little bit easier to handle than like these shred solos, which were death metal and a lot of the thrash stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I it's funny looking at my list here, and there really isn't any hardcore at all on this. It's all punk and then metal and like weird stuff, and yeah, like so. If anyone out there is not familiar with the New York Dolls, it's conceivable that there are people out there that are like, well, who are the New York Dolls? I mean, I think, in my opinion, if there was no New York Dolls, there would be no Sex Pistols. I mean,
Yep.
It's their whole guitar thing and the Sex Pistols is based around Johnny Thunders, in my opinion, and that's a New Yorker American, American New Yorker, Italian American New Yorker, and yeah, if you want to check them out, man, there's a song called Subway Train, which has always been one of my favorites. And then after the New York Dolls broke up, Johnny went on to form the Heartbreakers and then a bunch of solo stuff afterwards. And then, passed away, unfortunately, due to a drug overdose later on in his life, But
yeah,
with for a few years, I was a punk, just like that's what I was doing. I mean, I think I posted a picture a few months ago of what I looked like when I was in high school, and I was like a little punk sort of kid, What got me back around into metal was Metallica representing the Misfits and other various punk bands, and hearing them talk about how they were influenced by this other style of music other than metal, and how the two things kind of came together, and then created thrash essentially, so that's what brought me in. So Hetfield is also another one of my favorites, another guy who inspired me to play rhythm guitar, which, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess that's what I am. I'm not really a lead player. I'm pretty strictly a rhythm player, and so his riffs are incredible. Like I always thought Dave Mustaine was like probably the better technical player, but James Hetfield wrote the most memorable riffs out of those big four. And then I also have to mention the dual Jeff Hanneman, Kerry King, Slayer influence too. I mean, between Hetfield, Hanneman, and King, all of the best thrash riffs were written between those two guys, and the creativity with Hetfield and the Metallica riffs and then the Slayer riffs themselves, it's like it was fast. There was like a punk aesthetic to some of the stuff, and it was something that was very inviting for me coming from the punk, yes, hardcore world. Like I never really was like straight hardcore guy. I mean, of course I love Agnostic Front and and the Cro-Mags but it was never really like my thing per se. Integrity came a little bit later for me in the '90s, but as a young person, it was like punk, and then Slayer, and then Metallica, and that was like okay. My playing was getting better. I was all in on guitar. The whole muted picking thing, that technique was starting to come together for me, and like Metallica brought me back around to being like, oh, metal. Okay, cool. It's like not just, Sabbath and, some of these other bands. So yeah, that brought me around. So, that's probably the next step in my evolution here,
Yeah. I have to ask you something, which I had in the back of my mind for a while, and I meant to ask you. I I don't know where I have this idea from, but did you play in 10 Yard Fight for a brief stint?
No, those guys were my roommates though. We all lived together in Boston, and John actually asked me to play to fill in on guitar in the band for like a European tour. But it was during the time when I was doing Anodyne, and we were getting busy doing whatever stuff we were doing, and also I just didn't look like those dudes either. At the time I had like a beard and like my hair was all like crazy and stuff, and but they asked me because I didn't smoke or drink or do drugs. So it was like, oh yeah, you could put an X on your hand, and even though you look like a Charles Manson, you can play in the band in Europe, and we'll give you money. And I was like, nah, sorry, it's not good. It's not good for my image.
They could have given you like a champion hoodie and a baseball cap, and you would have been good to go. Like seeing you in shorts jumping around stage would have been interesting, I guess.
I still have my 10 Yard Fight windbreaker. Actually, it's in my closet right now.
That's actually like if it's well conserved and you like sell it on hardcoreshirt.com or something, you could get probably like $1,000 for that now.
Really? You think so?
Dude, 10 Yard Fight, there is a straight edge day, which is in memory of the day 10 Yard Fight broke up. They're like one of the biggest things that ever happened in straight edge hardcore. And like original merch of them is well sought after. Yeah.
That's funny, man. Because like I mean, it's funny how just a few years that separates people made a huge difference back then when I was a lot younger. I mean, those guys aren't that much younger than me, but like they were from a completely different place than I was, man. It's like at the time, they were discovering all this youth crew stuff, and to me, that stuff already came and went. I mean, I was thinking about the first wave of like bands I never listened to. You know what I mean? Like I that stuff all went right by me, man. Like Bold, all those bands, like the youth of today, none of that stuff means anything to me at all. I mean, I like Minor Threat, but they're just a good band.
Yeah.
And then
they're a punk band.
They're a punk band. Then the second wave of youth crew came around, and I was like, why? Like, why does anyone want to play this? Like, why would you want to do this music? It's just so. It's already all the songs have already been written in that style. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's just me. I was just into different things.
Yeah. Yeah, like I can see that. It's like the straight edge stuff. Like I listened to it for a while, but that never did it for me. I have like I wrote something down here as like a thing I want to talk about is like that I wrote down two hearts. I have two different hearts when it comes to guitar stuff. And the first thing is like what originated. I think to this day, I think it's connected to Justice for All being my entry point to Metallica, that I prefer chunky guitars when it comes to heavy music. So like a lot of low end and like a lot of pounding. That's what Integrity brought to the table and the youth crew bands didn't have. So these bands like Metallica, and what they spawned off was the new metal stuff that came out. And I mean, we did an episode on the Deftones.
Yeah.
So like I to this day, like the first Korn, I can listen to it, but the sheer sound that they had, the super downtuned stuff, which later on made me also fall in love with doom metal. Um, the Deftones, I mean, Stephen Carpenter is a stupid flat earther, but like his way of guitar playing was great, and like even making a seven-string guitar not sound completely idiotic. Um, I have to give shout outs to this guy and the Deftones in general, but I mean, we did an episode on that. And that was the time when the first Machine Head came out, when Typo Negative released Bloody Kisses, River Runs Red by Life of Agony came out. And all these bands had like this super chunky guitar tone. And to this day, like this is something I completely love. Um, I mean, like none of these bands, like I mean, Machine Head, yeah, Rob Flynn, I think he was a good guitar player. I just tried to listen to Burn My Eyes again, and I don't know, it didn't pass the test of time. But so like this heavy chunky guitar thing is on the one side, but what because you mentioned like the 50s bands, my parents, they grew up and they introduced me like just by playing the music early on to like 60s and 50s and 60s stuff. One of the first songs that ever really struck a chord with me was "No Milk Today" by Herman's Hermits,
Oh yeah. Okay.
and it has this single coil. I assume now with like an ear that can like differentiate between different guitar tones. I would say it was a Stratocaster with a like through a Fender amp. Actually, this opening picking is a thing that did something to me. And then Chris Isaak's Blue Hotel came out. And this song to this day, I just posted it the other day on Instagram, on Facebook as a video because this song was so important to me. It's just like the way it sounds. And this was the pathway to, well, we did like a recent episode on Roland S. Howard. So like this picking guitar play with like single coil guitars through a lot of reverb. Um, which also had like Roy Orbison when he was younger, playing Gretsch guitars. And that led my way to the Traveling Wilburys, and from there to Tom Petty. And I think Tom Petty is one of the best guitar players in my book of all times. Even he's minimalistic as fuck, but what he did and got out of these guitars is amazing. So I have this heavy, chunky guitar thing I want to do. At the same time, the single coil twang of Roland S. Howard, an absolute hero of mine, Tom Petty, Chris Isaak. Yeah, I got to give shout outs to these guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have Roland Howard listed here too for me, and you know that's no surprise since we last episode was all about his work. So,
Yeah.
but you know it's funny. Like I actually all these years, as much as I've loved Roland Howard, it's never really crept into any of the music that I've done until now. And
Yeah.
there's a new project that I'm working on right now with Sarah Timms, who, aside from being in Black Math Horseman and Ides of Gemini and Black Mare, she's appeared on a couple of the Tombs records as the female vocal. And we have two songs that we've worked on that are more or less done and are, you know, we're still adding things to it, or not necessarily adding anything to it, but working on some production stuff. And that's where I'm actually doing this kind of Roland S. Howard thing on the guitar, you know, and it's literally one guitar track, no overdubs,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just very minimal. But it's yeah, it's taken all this time to really figure out a way to express myself in the sort of context of Roland Howard, you know, and yeah,
Yeah.
eventually over the next month or so, I'm sure that those songs will surface in some form.
Yeah. Oh man, can wait to hear that.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is like she's kind of driving the boat on this one in some ways. Like it's kind of like the vibe is like the lyrical content is all her. It's not really. I'm just playing guitar on it.
Yeah. But I mean, it took me ages to have a band like this too. I always wanted to, but now with Ropes of Night, I can finally like live out all the influences of these bands that I love so much. Um, and we just started like we will record a new 7 inch with 2 songs, and they're kind of like the pathway to the new stuff. We have already 2 songs written for the second record, and it changed a lot, and it's going more into the into the realms of say the Roland S. Howard stuff of these immortal souls and his stint in Crime and City Solution. And I've always been a fan of 16 Horsepower and Woven Hand. So David Eugene Edwards' guitar playing is also really fascinating to me. And the new record of Ropes of Night will go more into this direction. And we've got the whole single coil thing down now. Like this, it's Martin, like the other guitar player, and I. We just rehearsed yesterday, and we're like, okay, I think we finally found exactly the tone that we want to. And I can finally like live out my influences of Gun Club and the Cramps and Greg Sage of the Wipers. He's also one of my heroes because he's just like as a three-piece what the Wipers did and what he got out of this guitar. It's amazing.
Now, sort of spanning the punk and return back to metal. As right around that time, I discovered Black Flag too, and Greg Ginn from Black Flag has been this kind of spiritual, director of a lot of like what I've done in guitar playing wise, and more prominently, I think in the Anodyne stuff that I've done back in the the '90s and into the 2000s. You can listen to that material and be like, oh, this guy definitely is a Greg Ginn sort of fan, But I remember I discovered Black Flag through the TV Party movie, which came. I'm not TV Party. Repo Man, the Repo Man movie, which had TV Party on the soundtrack, and that's kind of it's funny. Like that movie is how I got turned on to a lot of music because that like Fear was on there, but my exploration into Black Flag, and Greg Ginn's guitar style, like adding another layer to it, it was like so completely unorthodox. And, the Ramones, like Billy Zoom, that stuff was all based within very conventional guitar playing. But if you listen to Black Flag, especially the later era, specifically In My Head, which is like my favorite Black Flag record, there's some very, very free form, dissonant, unconventional guitar playing going on that record. And that, to this day, like, even though I'm not saying Tombs sounds like Black Flag, but there's definitely, strains of Greg Ginn's spirit present in all the stuff that I do, I think, at least to me,
I can see that.
Yeah. And then, like around that same time, I've talked about this before. There was like the WXCI Western Connecticut college radio where I lived in New York State was like right on the Connecticut border. So I would listen to this all the time. And that's how I discovered, Venom and Celtic Frost. And, being into punk, you listen to early Celtic Frost and Hellhammer and all that stuff. There's like a similarity. It sounds very punk, especially like the Morbid Tailed stuff, so I became like an acolyte of Tom Gabriel Fisher, aka Tom G. Warrior, and I think that even Triptychon, his most recent stuff, is still one of these guys who. I liken myself to him in the sense that we're both amateur guitar players. Like, neither one of us were like, practicing scales and doing all this like, shred guitar stuff. It was just very, very caveman and primitive and primordial in some ways. And though like my playing has evolved, to be more technical, there's still like that brute force element to my playing that I take from Tom G. Warrior, and just his ability to add all these different elements. Like if you listen to Triptychon, there's like strains of his other material. Like it sounds like there's a Celtic Frost thing going on, a Hellhammer thing. But then you can also hear this kind of like Bauhaus or Fields of the Nephilim kind of vibe that being brought into the fold. And that probably is really where like has inspired me to cross-pollinate into other genres.
Yeah. If I would have to like match guitar influences to your bands, I would also say that Anodyne had a very high octane Black Flag influence, even like pumped up to 200. And yeah, I mean the stuff Tombs did, especially like after the first big change in sound of Tombs. I mean, when you started Tombs, it was kind of, you could hear the Versoma stuff in there, and then like you incorporated blast beats, but it was still like more pop music, like wave kind of songwriting. But then when you started, like, I think with Path of Totality and these kind of bands, it was like it got more stubborn in a way, and it was more like, okay, we don't need to do like these crazy riffs, but like we do like heavy and effective riffs, and that's what Tom G Warrior stands for in my book. It's just like reduce it to the minimum that you need and make it as heavy as possible.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and that's you know something that's still very prevalent in like what we're doing. I think as a band.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That what I have like 2 or 3 like pathways here that I want to attach. First off, I'm like, what kind of setup do you play right now with Tombs?
Well, right now, amp wise, wow, it's funny you mentioned this. I got 2 different things I'm working with right now. Literally right now, I'm playing through one of these Axe Effects modeler boxes, which is like my entire sound is coming out of the Axe Effects, and I'm using my amp as just like the power stage to amplify everything. But so there's that, and which I just started using. But then there's the actual analog version of my setup, which is the 5150. I have like a tube screamer, like an Ibanez tube screamer, some digital effects, like digital delays. I got the Boss NS2 noise suppressor, which is we all rely very heavily on noise suppression for like the stops and everything. Yeah, our sound is very gated, very like, very tight, like in that sense. And then I think the only other effect I use is a chorus and one of those Holy Grail pedals. That's it.
Yeah. Because like one of the main things that I saw like in the like development of like Tombs over all these years, and I mean is it 15 years now already?
No, I think it's like
Tombs?
12 years maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But like I remember when Tombs started out and Planks was still around. Planks, my pedal board was really, really big, and like a lot of loopers and super complicated, and I got rid of most of that stuff when we started to like Ultra, because we had 2 guitars, and then the keys came in, and so. But I'm a sucker for reverb, and that's like what I like. The path that I want to do is like I want to talk about Kevin Shields and Martin Gore's influences in a second. But I remember that when Tombs shifted sounds and you started working with Rutan. Is it true? Like, was there a story that he sent you home and said, like, you get rid of the reverb and like practice the songs? No,
absolutely not. No way. No, that was. I mean, I don't know if that's some like urban legend, man. Like, no, that's never happened. That's
okay.
No, I mean, it's funny you mentioned, because I have Kevin Shields listed here too. But
okay.
Yeah, Versoma was definitely in that shoegaze kind of thing, and the early Tombs was literally the day that Jamie and I decided to not do the band. Literally the next day I started doing Tombs. Like by that weekend I was rehearsing with what was going to become the band, the first incarnation of that band. So, I still wanted to play around with that sound, So we made a couple records, leaning heavily into that. And I kind of feel like back then in like 2007, 2008, there was a lot of people who were playing around in that field, you know, yeah, we're into My Bloody Valentine and Swerve Driver and shoegaze music and all this stuff, and you know, which I love all those bands. And Kevin Shields is like a real innovator, you know, with that style. And that I was definitely dipping very heavily into that with a lot of reverbs and delays and all this other stuff. And you know, you can hear all that. Like even on Path to Totality, there's a lot of shoegazy kind of stuff on there. But it just wasn't really. I felt like I did everything I was going to do with that at that point.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, all right, this is like, you know, this is pretty much run its course. You know, let's add some, let's do different things. And also, not for nothing, it was only one very small aspect of the way I felt emotionally, you know, like, you know, that more sensitive style, I think, only represents maybe 10% of the raw power that I want to unleash on people. So, you know, that's why I decided to embrace the more, you know, the darker, like more aggressive kind of things that we got into afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Rutan never sent us home, man. It's like, yeah, we'd written all those songs like for Savage Gold after we did Path to Totality, and at that point, yeah, we were just developing more into that sound, and then, you know, I sent all the demos over to Eric, and he was just like, you know, down with it. And it wasn't like he's like, no, you can't use effects on this record. That was like not true at all.
Yeah, because I just remember when this came out and you sent it over, I'm like, wow, this is really dry. Like this is kind of almost like it's a typical Ruthann kind of record from the sound, and it's also like dipping into that shellac kind of way that Albini does, where everything's really dry and really hard,
except for the drums.
Yeah, right, yeah. But I'm always like I'm such a sucker for reverb. I don't know, man. I have 3 different reverbs on my pedal board, and I like to play around with this modulation. And I mean, Kevin Shields, we've got to give credit where credit is due. He invented something that no one has done before. Yeah, I mean, people give praise to Jesus and the Mary Chain, and I respect them. I was never a big fan. There's bands like Ride and Swerve Driver and all these things, or Slow Dive. But like Kevin Shields and My Bloody Valentine is the OG. Like this style that he plays with the millions of amps he uses on stage. It was next to Swans and Sun, the loudest thing I've ever seen. But like what impressed me the most with My Bloody Valentine is making an atmosphere with these pedals. And I mean, like Ultha, neither Plains nor Ultha ever sounded like a shoegazy band. But like creating atmosphere and layers of sound with pedals is something that is really dear to my heart, and which is always something I try to do. And I mean, we talked about it, and it's like this influence on film music, on like scores, on my way of writing is what made Ultha to the thing it is, like with the repetitive elements and drenching everything in reverb. So you have like this sonic wall you get like engulfed in and playing in the fog. So Kevin Shields and also Martin Gore of like Depeche Mode is one of my top 3 favorite bands. And I mean, if you think about Depeche Mode, you don't say like, oh yeah, that's a guitar band. But like, I mean, he always played guitar. He just made it sound different. And especially when Songs of Faith and Devotion came out, like the guitar played a more dominant role. And I just always was fascinated what he got out of these guitars in terms of like crazy sounds that he did. So Kevin Shields and Martin Gore have a high influence on what I do with Ultha. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I mean, Kevin Shields still is something that I reference here and there. I mean, I think with Tombs, though, we moved away from the rhythms having a lot of reverb and going more for like an articulated, gated kind of rhythm sound. But some of the textural stuff still has like, you know, a little bit of that Kevin Shields vibe. I'm going to say this too, man. I'm not a big Sonic Youth fan. I think Kevin Shields is a way more creative guitar player than Thurston Moore and Lee Ronaldo. You know what I mean? I actually have a disdain for both of for Sonic Youth as a band and those two guys as guitarists, in my opinion. You know, they're just like they're just better things out there. And Kevin Shields to me is like, you know, the man when it comes to doing this kind of washy, soundscapey kind of thing. And you can even hear it. Like even there's a more recent artist, Tamarin. I don't know if you're familiar with Tamarin.
Yeah. Saw her live. She's great.
Yeah, she's amazing. Like the early stuff was great. You know, like I'm not so big into the later material, but the
Madonna worship.
Yeah, it became like this kind of like party music thing, which I wasn't into. But those first couple of records, Waves, I think is the first one or something like that.
Yeah. The Tender New Waves is the third one. Yeah.
The dude who plays in that band, it used to be in Portraits of Past.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this like screamo band. That guy's his whole sound on those records is like a Kevin Shields thing completely.
Yeah, totally. And there was this wave when they started out. There was this wave of these retro shoegaze bands, and most of them were terrible. I mean, there's bands like Nothing. They come from the hardcore scene, and they incorporated this. I love them. They're a good band. But like trying to be the same thing, and that's the same when this post-rock thing happened, and everybody tried to sound like Mogwai, and it was just like an abomination after a while. And that was the same thing when everybody tried to sound like Kevin Shields. It's just like, yeah, of course you can Google on YouTube how to sound like Kevin Shields, and it will tell you, okay, you need these 4 pedals now, and you have to have a tremolo. But it still doesn't make you an inventor, and like it's still, if you lack the ability to write songs in textures, you're still a dumbass. Yeah. And Kevin Shields, like even the MBV record that came out like way later after Reunited, it's a great record, and this guy is like hands down an originator of a whole genre and a whole way of playing.
Yeah, and also just like the volume and the intensity is like something that's lost on someone who is just trying to, model their sound after him,
Yeah, and when you see if you say sound volume and modeling, we have to mention Michael Gira.
I got to be honest. Swans and Michael Gira as a band, yes, influence, but not guitar wise. Like, there's nothing about his guitar playing that influences anything that I've done, really. I got to be honest.
It has for me, mainly because I play the same guitar as he does. Mm-hmm. Because for years I've been looking for a guitar that like actually like fits my way of playing. And when I saw Swans, I was like, what the fuck is this? And I prefer double cut guitars because then I can go really high up in the frets.
Right.
My guitar over the year moved from like a punk rock, like below the belt, to almost like in front of my chest kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like he plays a Gibson 335 Lucille, which is one of the few hollow body models with a center block that is completely closed and doesn't have F holes. And the problem with the hollow body guitars, if you play high volume, is that they tend to have a lot of feedback. And then I saw Swans play, and he played them through a 200 watts rocker verb and another, like I think a Mesa Boogie or something. I'm like, if this guitar can handle this kind of volume without doing feedback, so that was my thing. And then I got one, and it's probably the only instrument that will never leave my house. For me, it's kind of like the pendant to your white Les Paul guitar that I got to know you with, and I've seen you play over all the years, and I assume you still have that.
Yeah, I still have it. It's just that it's retired though at this point. Like I don't use it live anymore.
But like Michael, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely retired. Like it's a relic. Maybe someday I'll use it for something, but not right now.
Yeah. Is the Emperor sticker still on there?
Yeah, it's the same. Nothing's changed. It's it's still there. It just doesn't stay in tune, man. And it's I don't know. It's just from a different era for me, really.
Yeah. But like coming back to Michael Gira is his way of like what you can hear on songs that he wrote for Angels of Light, and like when when they came back with My Father Will Guide the Ray Up to the Stars. I thought, no, I probably like missed some words in there, but like this repetitive kind of way that he plays, like always this like one string and then a chord of like boom, bam, bam, boom, bam, bam. This kind of like accentuation of like a chord and playing around with this. This is kind of like what influenced the last Planks record a whole lot, and like the general thing that like incorporate this kind of noise where you like go high up in the frets and you like play faster than the rest. So yeah, like you have like a certain tempo and you double the tempo with like a lot of like reverb on that and create these noise layers. That's what I learned from watching Michael Girard play, and this still to this day has a high influence on what we do with Ulfa, because the difference is when people see us play with Ulfa, they're like, why do you sound so much heavier? What are you like, what's your tuning? I'm like, we're in drop D. It's just like it's not that deep, but we have like keyboards, so like that the deep layer comes from there. Um, but what we do is like we have like this repetitive element and put a lot of reverb, and we play pretty much a rock band setup. It's like I play through a clean Music Man 75 watts head from the 70s, which is like clear. You can crank it up until 10 and it's still clear. And I use a tube screamer and like a distortion pedal and have this blues kind of guitar, which makes the sound that we use for Ultha. And that's so different from a lot of like we don't have. I mean, I know what you mean with gated sound, and Tombs really has like a full-on metal sound. And I think what attracts people to Ultha is that we don't sound like like your average metal band. Not just Tombs doesn't either, but like Ultha has in that realm of sound, we sound different than most bands.
Yeah, no, you guys definitely have a unique sound, and I think that's cool. Totally, man. It's like, and also I have a Music Man too. Those are great amps. I love those.
Yes, yeah, totally underrated still, but it's cool because you can get them for a fair price. I mean, now for Ropes of Night, I finally bought my first Fender combo. I have a Fender reverb, and it's great. And I can understand why everybody loves them so much. But for Ultra, it wouldn't make sense. But like the Music Man is great, yeah. And I mean, we have like all the low end and all the crazy sounds is coming from the keyboards and this like all the stuff that Andy does with all the electronics. Yeah.
Yeah, that you can do so much with synths, man, and like just it, utilizing that if you have a full-time synth player is pretty awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the guys I have to mention though is John Christ of Danzig. Just
Oh yeah.
That's my love of pinch harmonics. Always goes back to John Christ. And specifically his work on the first Danzig record and Lucifuge, which is the second is I think I prefer Lucifuge a little bit more over Danzig 1.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Her Black Wings, Long Way Back from Hell. Those are great songs, man.
Yeah. Do you have? I mean, I'm pretty much through my list with like old school references and like originators that influenced my guitar playing. But my question would be, I mean, if you're not done, we can mention the others. But
yeah,
I would be interested in like, are there any newer people that you saw that influenced your guitar playing?
Well, it's funny you say that, and he's not a new guy, but I actually have two more people I want to mention. One of them is a dude who's basically, I would say, we've both been active for about the same amount of time, and it would be Keith Huckins from Rorschach, Dead Guy, and Kiss It Goodbye. And Keith is like, basically we're the same age. We're active. We both started playing in bands around the same time. Obviously, he's way more like of an icon. Like people. Rorschach is a legendary band, Dead Guy, like they're back they're doing some shows again, and there's a little bit more attention on them. There's a documentary, that kind of thing. Kiss It Goodbye, was a huge, to me at least, they were huge influence in the 90s, but just for like sheer creativity and his ability to kind of meld like a classic heavy metal sound, a heavy metal influence into hardcore punk was like with Rorschach was pretty, you know, mind blowing, you know. And if you know, and there's like the discography of all the Rorschach stuff out there called Autopsy, where you can get all of their stuff on one disc or whatever, you know what I mean? And Kiss It Goodbye and Dead Guy were like what I was hoping like hardcore music would step into, that being like the future of that style of music, you know, but it really ended up not being anything. It just was a footnote of a potential that was never fully realized by hardcore. You know, hardcore was too enraptured of, you know, with the past and convention and doing the same thing over and over again and not having any kind of real forward thought. You know, that's my impressions, at least, of hardcore music, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I can see. Yeah. Great playing. All these bands are badass.
Yeah. You know, and the other guy is, I have to go back to Uli Roth from the Scorpions, man. Like that dude, he was in the Scorpions on just a handful of records: Virgin Killer, Taken by Force, In Trance, Fly to the Rainbow, and he was on the live Tokyo Tapes Scorpions record in the 70s. And any kind of European influence in Tombs, I think can be traced back to Uli Roth, you know. And that's not to say that we don't rip off Mayhem or Watain or any of these other bands equally, but I feel like that, for me, that attraction to that sound started with the Scorpions and specifically Uli Roth's contribution to the band's sound.
Yeah, I can see that.
And he's a countryman of yours. He's a fellow German.
Yeah. Yes. We played a festival called Hello Hammerberg, and the year that we played, it was like a bunch of cool bands. The year after that, Uli John Roth headlined, and like a bunch of my friends went there, and they're all obsessed, like taking pictures with him. And we're like, oh man, like I would have watched him play live. Like I dig some old Scorpions live stuff, and I mean I didn't grow up like with Judas Priest and all these bands. They came later for me. Like at first I was like, oh, it's not heavy enough. But I got like around and appreciate stuff like Judas Priest now and the Scorpions, especially, and that's probably one of the bands, but I don't really know like what's the name of the actual guitar player. Thin Lizzy. I mean, Phil Lynott was the bass player, but like, does Thin Lizzy like have like this one outstanding guy playing guitar? Because the guitar playing on Thin Lizzy is just out of this world.
Well, they've had a lot of different guys in and out of the band. Gary Moore was in Thin Lizzy. You know, there's been like, I mean, maybe like certain records. You know, the Jailbreak era of the band. Yeah. You know, that's the one that a lot of people are. You know, they reference that as being like the quintessential record for them. So I don't know, like which Thin Lizzy record is the one that
the Live and Dangerous record is something I always go back to, and Jailbreak and these kind of things. Renegade is my favorite, but it's just like overall the guitar playing in Thin Lizzy, and also like the guitar and bass together is just so good. And I kind of wish like at some point I would have had the balls to sit down and actually like practice guitar playing, because like I'm self-taught. I like never had guitar lessons, and everything I learned is like looking at people playing and stealing, but I never actually sat down and tried to play like a Judas Priest riff. Like, of course I can play Breaking the Law and this kind of stuff, but like the really heavy riffs and difficult riffs, or like also like trying to play a Maiden song, or Thin Lizzy, King Diamond stuff, like just the riffing, not the solos, just the riffing. I've never done stuff like this, and I think I will probably never learn this in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to learn songs, I think. I mean, it's you know, like I'm not one to do all that much of that type of thing. But there's stuff I like to play around with. Like when I go to the practice space, I'm like, trying to mess around with ideas. I try to like learn them by memory though. I should probably actually play along to the records because usually I figure them out incorrectly. You know what I mean? Because I'm not like trying to play along.
Yeah, that's the same thing. At some point, I get frustrated and I just go back to the main riff that I love so much and don't learn the actual like the second part to the song. Is just like, oh, I just want to know this one. I always want to write something new. It's also like when we go to band practices, like, do we have to play the old songs? I kind of want to do new stuff. But it's so essential to rehearse like the old stuff and like learn them really properly.
Dude, I actually sometimes I'm on the same page because I'm always writing new shit. So when we go to practice, part of me is like, oh man, we got to play this set again. I'm like, fuck. But then again, the other side of me of like, practice being like wrestling practice where you just cycle through your drills, and you drill everything into your muscle memory so that you can, really do it well. But yeah, we've been adding songs to the set, because we got these tours coming up, which we're going to announce soon, and playing the old songs and just being like we're actually added some songs that we haven't played in like 3 or 4 years, so it's kind of cool, especially since out of the pandemic, a lot of people haven't seen us play live in a while. We're going to have like a bunch of stuff that's from records that we haven't played live in a while, so it'll be cool. And we changed some of it too, actually. Some of the older songs have a slightly different thing going on now, which I think is always fun to do.
Yeah, I also love this to like reimagine like some parts or like we kind of like we cut songs together because like some of the older songs like they're close to 20 minutes and we will like just like strip them down a bit. But it's fun to rearrange stuff. Yeah, man. It's just like let me get my last ones off the list because I don't know if anybody's still awake out there with all the nerdum. This, by the way, will be a gigantic playlist, I assume, that we will put together on Spotify.
Oh yeah, for you guys, there's going to be a ton of stuff. Even, especially if some of you guys out there aren't familiar with some of these guys, like it's be really cool to check out. Like, for example, the Uli Roth stuff on those Scorpions records. That might not be a household name for everybody.
Yep. On my list, because we talked about thrash and like classic rock and punk and all this stuff, but like when you think of like Tombs and Ultha, you think of like probably the genres of death and black metal. And I was thinking about like, is there a black metal guitar player that really influenced my playing? I gotta say, man, it's just like Emperor were like my favorites back then. So maybe Ishan, but I gotta say, even this could get me into trouble, getting like Ultra canceled. But the guitar playing of Varg in Burzum, especially on Philosophem, I think that's probably one of the most important guitar playing that black metal has ever seen. Because without him, maybe 70% of the black metal bands nowadays wouldn't know how to play. And he was so minimalistic in his approach. And I mean, I started listening to Burzum before it came out that he was a fascist. But like the guitar playing and the ideas on Philosophy is so simple and so good. So I give kudos to that. Bill Steer of Carcass. I was always a big Carcass fan, and still like the newer stuff. I wouldn't buy a new Carcass record, but whatever, like when he plays, you can always hear that it's him. And like Necroticism and Hard Work, they're excellent records. And then I have to say, maybe the most like the newest one that I found out about is also that I shouldn't probably mention because he got Me Too'd. But he apologized for this, but nothing is ever good enough. Don't want to get into an argument about this with people, but Ryan Adams, not Brian Adams, Ryan Adams, is to me one of the best songwriters of the last 20 years. And his guitar playing in the style of Americana mixed with country and also like Discord punk. Dude, I fucking love the music of Ryan Adams, and his guitar playing is so crazy good. Yeah.
Well, speaking of black metal, I have to agree with you that Burzum and it's funny, these guys are, one guy murdered the other one, but Euronymous and Varg are really,
Yeah.
I would be lying, I would be remiss in leaving them off of this list too. The first black metal bands aside from, Celtic Frost is and Venom are and Bathory, that kind of stuff. Besides that, the first second wave of black metal stuff I ever heard and absorbed and loved was Burzum and Mayhem and Emperor, all three of those bands.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say that, Euronymous, Varg, and Isan are definitely huge influences, even though I can't even play remotely as anything Isan done.
Yeah.
And later Emperor, for sure.
Yeah.
And also to that list, I want to add Ghoul from Mayhem and Cradle of Filth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy's a pretty incredible guitar player. And fuck all the cancel shit, man. I mean, even Ghoul apparently people are saying some stuff about him, but it's just you know what, man, get another hobby. Anyone who he who is without sin cast the first stone is what I have to say.
No. Yeah, it's just. I mean, there's always this discussion about how can you separate artist from art, and everybody can make up his or her mind, but people have different opinions on that. And yes, of course, Varg is a complete piece of shit, but you can't deny how influential Burzum was and still is, especially Philosophem. And I mean, when it comes to Ryan Adams, this guy at least tried to apologize, but nothing's ever good enough. I mean, it's the same thing that I mentioned with Ulfa, that people still cancel shows on us because some years back we played with Inquisition, and it's crazy that okay, so what should we do? Should we just hang out with Antifa bands now? And we were friends with people in the Antifa, and they said this is complete horse shit. And it's just it's so crazy but it's mostly the internet trolls. But you can't deny, I don't know if you're familiar with Ryan Adams.
No, I only know, I know the name. I don't know any of the music, really. I got to be honest.
Oh, man. Yeah, dude. If you, I mean, he started out as a country guy, as a young country genius. But over the years, he developed a style. I would say he's up there with Neil Young, with Bruce Springsteen, with Tom Petty. But he always rocks Black Flag shirts or the Smiths shirts and all these he did an EP that's called 1989. No, wait, it's not 1989. Let me see, 1984. It's a 7-inch with 12 songs, and they could be a Rites of Spring kind of thing. And so he's familiar with Fugazi and all these bands. But his self-titled record, Ryan Adams, this EP, and the Prisoner record, they are some of the best Americana, rock, pop, punk music I've ever heard in my life. And his way of playing is so good. Love his lyrics, love his way of singing. I will put some in the playlist, and I will send you the links before that. I'm sure you can appreciate it too.
What did he do that got him canceled?
Yeah, he was in a couple of relationships with big stars, because at some point he was everybody's darling, and he was not a sexual predator, but he was we was forcing people to kind of the Louis C.K. thing, some in that realm, and just being an asshole towards women and being abusive. And I mean, he was an alcoholic for a while, and I follow his Instagram, and he's sobered up, and he got his shit together, and he apologized, and he tries to do better. He went through therapy, but yeah, he said I have 8 records written and produced, and all the labels I worked with dropped me again and again, and I don't know, man. who knows? Like the Blake Judd apologized, and then like Prophecy gave him money, and then he fucked up again. He's a junkie, so like, and who knows? Like Ryan Adams might be in the best shape of his life, and might have his shit together. Maybe at some point he will be an asshole again. I am not the one to judge. I'm the one to like give people a chance, and I think from what I saw, he's trying his best, and like I want to give him this chance, and I wish like people would give him a chance to release the music, because the music is just really fucking good. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, man. Like I'm gonna because he was canceled. I'm gonna check out his other material because because they, quote unquote, they don't want me to hear his music. I'm gonna find it and listen to it. So
Yeah,
you know.
perfect.
But and it's a real moving target as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable these days. Because even, you know, I don't know if this is news in Europe, but you know, Joe Rogan has come under a lot of fire here in the States, at least.
Yeah,
You know, and you know, people at some point I can imagine saying that, oh well, this guy listens to the Joe Rogan Experience, so he must be like some alt-right, like nut job, racist.
yeah.
Misogynist, homophobe, or something like that, you know, and it's just like I don't buy into any of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, you know, like I have never met Ryan Adams. I don't hang out with him, and maybe he still is the biggest piece of shit. Who knows? It's just like I can listen to the music and can appreciate it for the glory it is. And it's the same with like Burzum records. I mean, I don't like the old, like the stuff when he tried to play fast. For me, it's pretty much just the Philosophem record. And then when he came back with Bellus, fuck all the ambient stuff and all this like other shit he did in music. But Philosophem is just like an undeniable, monumental album and its simplicity and just the way it shaped everything. And I don't want to like prevent myself from listening to this just because that piece is he's a piece of trash. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a modern thing to look at the artist as like his personality and his lifestyle interchangeable with his creative output. You know, that's like a modern concept, which is like complete bullshit, really. You know, I mean, then what are you have to go back to, you know, Beethoven and Richard Wagner and all these people, and you know, and oh, I don't like him because he was this or that or whatever. Or he had slaves or something. You know what I mean? It's like I just don't know where you should only take the creative output at face value, and then you can make addenda to what your feelings are about the artist. But I don't think it's just such a fucking fascist idea to like cancel people and be like, oh, well, you can't listen to him anymore because we said so. You know, I'm just not into that at all. And I just think that people are complicated, you know, and that's just kind of how it is, you know. I just read now just that Ghoul, apparently, someone had some article about how Ghoul like follows some alt-right accounts on Instagram, so you shouldn't listen to him, or you shouldn't listen to Mayhem or something like that. I'm like, well, there's other reasons why you probably would want to, you know, cancel Mayhem, but like is that really one of them? You know, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an open secret that Hellhammer is home and he has a lot of Nazi paraphernalia, and also like is kind of like that's what I heard, and that's already the problem. I shouldn't even run my mouth because it's something I heard. But like a lot of bands that are like they know Mayhem, they say like Hellhammer is also like an asshole that has like a Nazi shit. But I have no proof. I have no idea, so I will shut my mouth because I don't want to be one of these guys. Yeah.
And being an asshole doesn't mean that you should cancel somebody. I mean, that's like such a subjective thing. I mean, there are people out there who probably think I'm an asshole, which, you know, they might be right in a certain sense.
Yeah, that's the thing with that's the thing with Inquisition back then. I mean, yeah, he did something wrong. He had like this shitty pictures and his shitty harsh noise project, and he's like, he apologized for this. That's good for me. That later on it came out that he is into child pornography makes him for me a complete bag of shit, and he can go fuck off and die. But if people want to listen to that kind of shit, like to his music, well, it's the music, and listen to it by God means. but don't book shows for this asshole. Yeah.
I mean, I don't like Inquisition because I just don't really like the band necessarily.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not a factor for me. You know, whether the music's good or not. I mean, I don't know. Also shame on fucking Metal Sucks for going back 11 years into this guy's past to dig this bullshit up. You know what I mean? It's like, who's worse, the guy or the fucking ghoul, the ghoulish journalist hack that digs back to find dirt on somebody? Like, is that what kind of vocation is that, to find out on like these very unsavory items about people? Like, what kind of fucking ghoulish vocation is that? You know, I don't know.
But that's how the world works now. People want to have like the dirt so they can feel better about their own miserable lives.
I guess so, man. I don't know. I got other things I want to do with my life besides like go down checklists and, you know, and that whole mentality. The really disturbing thing about that is like people need to have better critical thinking skills as opposed to like having someone decide for them what they think is right or wrong, you know?
Yeah.
This whole movement in culture is eroding all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. I'll be dead soon in the next, few years. So what does it matter what I say, you know?
Yeah, we've got better things to do. We've got to obsess about great guitar players, and I think we did our fair share of this today.
Hell yeah.
And I hope, Alex, you're satisfied with the outcome.
Yeah, if not, I'm sure I'll hear about it, you know.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you next time.
It doesn't pay to try. All the smart boys know why. It doesn't mean I didn't try. I just never know why. It's the close all alone. Who, baby, you're not at home. And when I'm home, big deal, I'm still alone. It's a restless island. Beat my head against the pole. Try to knock some sense down in my bones. And even though they don't show, the scars aren't so old. And when they go, they let you know. You can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. Don't try. Don't try. You're just a bastard kid, and you got no name. 'Cause you're living with me, we're one and the same. And even though they don't show, the scars are so old. And when they go, they let you know. Okay, you can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. Don't cry. Don't try. You can't put your